Thank you for staying with us. Economic growth is alone of the most powerful instrument for reducing poverty and improving the quality of life of a country. In a bid to contribute immensely to Nigeria's development, discussions that revolve around building the economy has to be set from food security, transportation, job opportunities, amongst others. It is of utmost importance to plan ahead for a more sustainable economy. Joining us via Zoom is development economist, professor of economics and international finance expert, Professor Ken Ife. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Oh, hi. Good morning. And
now,
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. At some point, the CBN governor said that the quest for building a more sophisticated economy was the major component of the monetary policy, which was anchored on agriculture, MSMEs, industrial and manufacturing concerns, and all of it. When you look at how far this administration has come, would you say we were able to achieve that economically? Talking about having a sophisticated economy?
Well, a very long way, a very long milestone has been reached by this administration in respect of that secondary mandate of the the central bank, which is to promote sustainable economic development. The two primary mandates, obviously, are financial system stability, maintaining the financial system, and the second one is to price control. There may well be issues on price control, but the secondary mandate, which is to promote sustainable economic development, was where they came in and stamped in the authority, and it's always debatable, but that was where they focused resources on the real sector of the economy and then promoted export. They put 8 trillion naira into finance development to be able to get SMEs and agriculture, like Anchor Borrowers Program, got over 1 trillion naira, 4 million farmers got involved, over 5 million hectares done. I mean, these kind of things were never done anywhere, never came anywhere near that. And even as I go around the whole of West Africa, where I'm the economic advice, the lead consultant, no country in West Africa has ever ventured to anywhere near what the central bank kind of resources that they put in. Of course, it's a very big economy, no doubt at all. And we are also have over 100 million francophone African citizens, taking stuff from Nigeria, and we can't stop those.
All right. Well, Prof, let's also, look at the state of Nigeria's revenue generation drive under the administration of outgoing President Buhari, and of course now that a new government is coming on board, he has spoken extensively in his policy document about what he would do. But realistically, what options are there really to shore up our revenue in the country, looking at when you weigh them against, the debt burden before the country?
Okay, let me put this in proper perspective because there are 9 areas that underpin the economy. One is peace and security, without which no development can actually take place, meaningful development. Then you have the investment. You need investment. That's number 2. You need investments in critical assets of the government, of the economy. And those critical assets, we know, are areas of human resource development, the mineral resources, and the natural resources. Those are the 3 key areas. Then, of course, you need to look at the capacity of the government to borrow money to support these areas and build like infrastructure. And then you look at what contribution of the private sector is necessary to be able to complement. Then the 3rd area is debt sustainability, which is where you are coming from. And there are issues around that debt sustainability. But before we delve into that, which I'm going to do, we'll look at the revenue crisis, which is second point you've raised. Agri and bioeconomy is the other area. Industrialization and value addition is the other area. Then you have services that are doing really well. And then you have export-led growth and trade and all that stuff. So if we bear in mind that these are all the areas that when you clear them up, then you will get a very good, sustainable, growing economy. Now you come to revenue. Why revenue is part of the debt sustainability issue is that we are now hitting our debt ceiling. That is debt to GDP ratio. But that is not what causes the big problem. What causes the big problem is, are you generating enough revenue to be able to service your debt? The answer is that we are not. We are not because the current revenue is only about 7% of our GDP. Sorry, our government revenue with the GDP, which is very, very low. 6-7% of GDP is very, very low because you have comparator nations that are doing 20%, 18%, 20% and more. If you take tax revenue like VAT, our VAT is 7.5%, but most other countries are over 17.5%. So it means that we're actually collecting 1/3 of the revenues that we need to collect to be able to show up our spending and demonstrate our ability to service our debt and still continue to fund all kinds of economic activities, infrastructure, and the rest, and even pay salaries. So that is the big lacuna that we have. But then there are major steps that are being taken by government. Government has announced 2 years ago an aggressive revenue mobilization initiative, and they've actually taken a very major step now in signing up the Petroleum Industry Act, and that has pushed NNPC away from government and they moved it into a private company. But it also brought its own issues, that the way they are running things, they are having to ask us to go and pay 500 billion naira every day, every month to support this our petroleum subsidy. But it's another matter for another day. But we will still come to them because they are a major way for government to raise revenue. I will come to that. Then you have this new child that has been delivered, which is a much solid foundation, which is the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. That is a game changer for us because what we have is that all our debt has been debt finance. And when it is just about debt finance, people don't even know that you have an asset. So, but if we begin to shift from debt finance to asset-based finance, the whole equation changes because you can now deal with liquidity without overcharging your balance sheet, and then you can do a lot more. And I can give you an example, just a quick one. Saudi Arabia has a company they call Saudi Aramco, which is like an NPC. Now, Saudi is many times richer than Nigeria, and they produce more than 5 times more oil than Nigeria anyway, more crude. But they needed $25 billion. So they didn't go to IMF or World Bank to borrow the money. They said, oh, look, tell me the value of my Saudi Aramco. So they did a valuation and said it is $1.5 trillion. It's all right, okay, take it to the market and then give out 5%. They got the money that they needed. But do you know that by doing this, immediately corporate governance had to sit in, then public eye, you have to run the business now in serious corporate. So what happens is that after 2 years, from 2019, 2 years after that, the valuation of this company went up to $2.3 trillion. Just the discipline, transparency, accountability that are starting there, the company started flying. So if we do something like that with NNPC, obviously we know that they have capacity to borrow money, they have capacity to stop the hemorrhage on our revenue, and then also the fact that they themselves, since 2014, they were sending $3 billion to central bank, but they reduced it to 300 million, only 10%, knowing that crude accounts for 79% of our, like say, forex revenue, gas 10%, leaving almost 90% is just to that industry. So when they no longer send that money and send only 10% of it, it creates more problem for forex. Now CBN must spend $1.8 billion every month to service debts, to provide for invincibles and all of that, and then trade finance. But they can't because they're only getting 300 million from NNPC cruise sales, which already accounts for 90%. So you can see the constraint, and then the importers are still importing at the same level since 2014, $4.6 billion every month. So where are you going to get the money? They are requesting for, that tells you that there is an import-dependent economy, heavily import-dependent. So they are still importing 4.6 billion every month, and then you now have an NPC that has done a direct trade swap, a crude swap with their refiners, give them all the crude, and then they send you back PMS. And after sending back the PMS, they go to government and say, look, is under recovery. You're going to go and find 500 billion naira every month to subsidize. So it means that our revenue, foreign revenue, is depleted completely. And then you left CBN at a hopeless situation where they cannot start printing dollar in Nigeria. So people don't want to look at that, because that is where the problem lies. You have to correct that. It's a demand and supply situation. And I've had economists, I've had many people who say, float naira, float it to where? Where are you floating it to? You have to manage the balance, the supply of your forex, and then match it against the demand. At the moment, there's such a disconnect between the two that if you just float the naira might drop to 2,000 naira per dollar, and it keeps on dropping. It's just like a kite. You break the kite will fly. You don't know where it's going to end. So there are serious issues, and then because of this security, investments are not so keen to come in. So we have to not only do what we can, but also focus on domestic investors, because Dangote, he put up almost $20 billion in his refinery. But he never classed as a foreign direct investor. So these are some of the issues that there are lots of issues in this whole economy.
I am wondering where you see the president-elect, how you see him hitting the ground running, where he should begin from to addressing the myriad of issues you have analyzed, and to ensure that the economy is stabilized. And then there's also the matter of the CBN governor saying that with the coming on board of the Dangote refinery, that the matter of the forex would also be addressed or stabilized, so to speak. Address all of these issues for us.
No, this is very important, actually. The coming of the Dangote refinery will not stop the problem, but it will reduce it significantly. Because now, and don't forget now, Dangote is going to be importing crude from 3 different continents. It's an important strategy for him, because if he relies entirely on Nigerian crude and they keep causing all these problems and disruptions, then his refinery is going to drop suboptimal. So he has to balance those. So they will be giving him, and then he will be holding stock, and then he will be importing to balance. So that anytime you have the militants strike, he doesn't shut down his factory. So that's number one. And then also, because he's in a free trade zone, we shouldn't expect him to give us more than 40% of his crude. So he will still have to export some of the refined products. But I'm sure that there might be a waiver somewhere so that they can give us as much as we need. But the fact of the matter is this: if he supplies us the crude or the refined product, it's going to be a lot cheaper than doing what the NNPC is doing. How can you send a whole output out, and then you bring PMS, and then you say, oh, the PMS, oh, the price of importing the PMS, exporting the crude, importing the CMS, that means under recovery. That means you are spending more to import the product. Nobody will be interested in this kind of analysis. So let them sell their crude, please, and then let's get the refined product from Dangote. We're not going to be loaded with the cost of exporting the crude, the inconsistency and transparency issues around that, the cost of refining it abroad, which is creating jobs outside. We're not going to be we're not going to be clumbered with the whole issue of the cost of bringing back the PMS, and then the whole shenanigan around what are we actually consuming every day. We don't know. Nobody knows, but we do know they are flowing out through the borders. So all of those areas, and then the whole overhead of the NNPC that is loaded on the import issue. Then let's get this from him, and then let them give him crude, because it's a monopoly and it's just not being transparent enough to inspire the confidence. So I think, and secondly, when you have a monopoly, you can't have the competitiveness at the same time, because that's the antidote of it. So when Dangote starts selling, then you now have a competition between what NNPC is giving us and then what a private sector company is giving us. It is bound to be a lot cheaper. And then it's also going to mean, right, okay, NNPC, give us the money from the crude, the proceeds from the crude, so that we can get some into the central bank and start dealing with forex releases. And then at the same time, the Dangote will be bringing in dollars because he's exporting the products made in Nigeria. So, on both counts, we are going to be extremely better off than what we are seeing today.
Prof, I asked earlier, before we went on the break, that how should the incoming administration hit the ground running so as to stabilize the economy?
Well, the issue that the current administration will have to address, as I mentioned before, are 9 key areas. But there are order of priority. First of all, I said they have to get peace and security under control because investors want to come to your country if you are competitive. One. Two, if you have infrastructure. They don't want to borrow money. Don't forget, they borrow their money. They don't want to borrow their money to come and do a particular set of business or manufacturing or investing in services. And then they have to use a lot of that money to build the local infrastructure that they need. Secondly, they're not coming here to come and invest their money and get killed and get their whole thing vandalized. So those two things they are in the minds of the investor. So we have a serious job of making sure we get that investment. The second thing is this: we have to position ourselves in a way that allows us to attract investment, and then also investment in critical assets. And I have mentioned what these critical assets are. First is human capacity, human development. Japan, what can you just tell me what minerals, solid minerals, and oil and crude that Japan has? But Japan is the second, third richest country in the world because all they do is that they invested in human capacity. And that's why you've got them in electronics, in building cars, and it's just sheer investment in human capacity. You look at Singapore, which mineral? What do they have? Nothing. But they just invested in governance and then also in seaport and all these hubs. And look at how prosperous they are. And they are ranking in many socioeconomic indicators. Then you have the second area, which is mineral resources. Now, mineral resources are the things that you will find, solid mineral, you have oil, you have gas, and all of that. We invest in them. At the moment, we're only investing in upstream. We are not even investing in downstream and midstream. The investment that you have in midstream, which is your refinery, look at that, 4 of them, government, and then it's not working. They issued license for 75 modular refineries. Only 1 or 2 are coming up. The other licenses have to be revoked. Then I begin to wonder, why would we not invest in our mineral resources? You've got the story about solid mineral, and it's just not happening. All right, you keep that aside. Then you have the third investment in natural resources. Third critical sector is natural resources. Here you have agroecology that is so favorable. You are producing, name it, anything in agriculture. Nigeria is number 1 in 10 areas in Africa, and at least number 1 in about 3 areas in the world. Cassava will produce 25% of world cassava, 62 million metric tons. Yam will produce 71% of world yam production. But even as we produce 71%, Ghana produces only 4%. But Ghana accounts for 70% of exported yams. Are we not there? So let's, but if we are going to go into that, we need to bring in technology and then go to agro and then bring bioeconomy and agro-industrial development and all of that, and then export-led policy that will make sure that we prioritize. 70% of what Nigeria tries to export gets rejected. We've got to deal with that. And we deal with that in the context of our AFCTA, and of course, we haven't fared well at all in ECOWAS. All right, we'll move on. Then you have this issue of debt. The president needs to deal with that. And I have explained that we're only getting 7% of our GDP when the average in Africa is 18% of GDP. And some of them are already doing 24% like South Africa. So we are underpowered. The economy is underpowered because only 1/3 of potential revenue is being generated. But there are several approaches to increasing that generation. And a good document has been, since 2 years ago, an aggressive revenue generation strategy by the Ministry of Finance. But that needs to be supported and pushed through. Then you come to the new establishment, which is the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. That's a game changer because they've been given a mandate to deliver 100 trillion asset base. So they're working on that. And I'm sure they've already enumerated 18.5 trillion. But they're on the road to that. They need to be supported because that is changing, is going to dramatically change the game because it will shift the borrowing from debt to asset. So that makes a huge difference because and then it doesn't appear in the government's balance sheet. So that will help take away the steam or the oxygen in the debt sustainability crisis. Then you got the unemployment challenge. Please, we need to know that we have come to the end of this road. how can Nigeria be having a level of unemployment that is about 40%? And if you disaggregate that employment data and look at the people under 35 years, those people under 35, those young people under 35 years are 75% of our population. And they're experiencing far worse unemployment. If you look at them, the unemployment rate is 48% and the underemployment 22%. So they're actually 70% unemployment for the people in that category. That is not a good sign. And we should not waste any time in beginning to address this, because when Tunisia exploded, their unemployment was only 15%. When a young man put fire and petrol on himself, and then what happened? The whole of the North American countries went that place. You don't want that. Nigeria is 5 times more unemployment than it was in Tunisia when that crisis started, the Arab Spring. So we have issues around that. Then you have the revenue crisis that I've mentioned, that the low tax income would mean that you're going to have to deal with how you raise tax without punishing the people, that the core people that are currently paying it. So you have to widen the tax net and then remove some of the incentives, for example, some tax waivers that are not productive, and then, so you can control those. And then there are some leakages you have to block in that system. Then part of the revenue crisis comes from forex crisis. And I have mentioned before that what...
Right, Prof, because of time constraints, I just wanted to, you spoke briefly about, the issue of fuel subsidy, and that's a subject that many analysts have spoken about. And the president-elect has also said that he will neither subsidize fuel consumption in neighboring countries nor allow a few to reap from windfall of profits. With this Dangote refinery now, are we likely, are you hopeful, of course, regardless of the discontent that may arise, are you hopeful of government finally walking the talk on the issue of fuel subsidy removal?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. I've always advised over the last 2 years that we should do incremental. In other words, every quarter you put in a little, just raise it by about 1.5%, just incremental, from 150 to 160, 160 to 180. If you're doing it incremental, people won't react. But if you not want to one day you switch off, you're gonna have problem. If you one day you double it, you're gonna have problem. You do it incrementally, small. By the end of the year, it's gone up significantly. Then you continue. So that's one. But it doesn't mean you cannot deal with structural issue behind that, which is why is supply of crude dropping? So you have to deal with those structural issues. And why the refineries not working? Why are the modular refineries not being supported? Why is NBC not investing in the modular refineries? Why are the states not investing in the modular refineries? All of those have to be addressed. But anyway, the fact that Dangote comes in now is very useful, because what it means is temporarily, we'll have a temporary respite. He can get a special waiver that allows him to sell 100% of this thing to us and then revert back later to 40% because it's in a free trade zone. But having said that, that also makes us receive more dollars.
Prof, we have run out of time. We need to wrap up this conversation now. We must thank you, development economist, professor of economics and international finance expert, Professor Kenny Faye, for your time on the program.